So thank you so much for joining us today. I am Amy Work. I am the Director of Communications and Member Programs with the Indiana Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts. And then joining me today is Sheila Schroeder and Lois Mann. If you don't know who they are work for the Conservation Cropping Systems Initiative and have experience in this area. And so they are going to share with you today what they know on farmer ride-alongs. So I will turn it over to Sheila and Lois. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks everyone for joining us. We can be definitely informal today. If questions come up throughout the presentation as we're talking, please just unmute yourself. Let us know what your question is. There'll be plenty of time at the end as well. This is not your typical hour-long presentation with 2 minutes for questions. This is very much, we want it to be interactive and driven by you and what you want to know about farmer ride-alongs. But first we'll offer just a little bit of insight, what we've found personally. And for me, it's been absolutely crucial for my job. I did not grow up on a farm. I do not have that background. And I know that many employees are in that same boat. So there's nothing like getting into the tractor with the farmer to learn about what they have going on. Classroom is great. All of the trainings are great. Learning all of that valuable information about producers and their operations, but that one-on-one experience in the tractor with them and how they got started and why they do what they do has been just critical for me to be able to do a good job in the agricultural space, since it's not my background. What you might want to add to that, Lois?
On the other hand, I did grow up on a small farm, and my uncle did most of the farming because Dad was a welder, but I got to ride the tractor with him, and but nothing like the large farms are today. You know, this was just small potatoes compared to what guys are doing today. And when Lisa first asked me to do a farmer ride along, it's like, you want me to what? I I'm not the type of person to just go out and ask somebody if I can ride in their tractor. That sounded really foreign to me, but I'm so glad I did it. And if the opportunity presents itself, try it. It's amazing to just ride for an hour or two and ask a couple questions and let them talk about their farm, and it's really interesting. You'll learn a lot.
Absolutely. When it came down to who to ride with, I was lucky that I had a friend, a personal friend who was a farmer, but it had never occurred to me one time to learn more about what he does or how he does it or any of that information. So it was really comfortable for me the first time I did a ride along because it was just a friend. Since then, I've ridden with lots of people whom I did not know at all, and I have found all of them to be um, very willing to share. They're on their own turf. They're in general, has a stereotype. Farmers are proud of what they do and proud of how they treat their land and their farm. So they've been really willing to share what's worked for them. So some ideas here, if you don't have that personal friend that you can look to or family member, if you work for a district, you might have a board member that would be willing to host you, or even a hired hand of a board member. You could also speak with any of the conservation partnership staff to find suggestions of who might be good to ride along with, including Lois and I. You know, we're in the north. I'm in the northwest. Lois is in the northeast, but we have other staff members all over the state. So we're pretty familiar with producers in any area of the state and would maybe be able to make connections for you to find someone to ride along with if you're having trouble. finding someone. Lois has, I think, maybe one of the best stories of someone that she found to ride along with. If you'd like to tell us about your roadside friend, Lois.
I just stopped my car and waited for the tractor to come up to the edge of the road and asked if I could ride along. And they're like, sure. I've done the same thing out behind our house. There's a field that the guy up the road owns, and I know him, I know the family. So I've had, I think, 3 opportunities on that field, once with his son, once with Barry, and once with a hired hand. So a couple of supervisors that I used to work for when I worked for Fulton County Soil and Water. I think those were my first ride-alongs, and I scheduled them because they're on the other side of the county. But the ones locally here around my house, if I see a tractor going, I just stop by and ask them if I can ride along.
That's awesome. And I will say one other thing is I have ridden with 2 different people more than once. And that has been helpful to me too, because they'll become more comfortable as they get to know you and share more about their practices and how they do things. Not that there isn't value in riding with anyone just one time, because there is. They all have a different story to tell, and there's something to be learned from anyone. But it has
Yeah.
been really helpful to me too to ride along with someone more than one time.
And if you worked for a district, I have on a ride along just asked, let me pick your brain. If we were going to have another field day, what would you like to see? And you can get some ideas right directly from the farmers on what they're looking for in a field day. So that just takes it another step.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to that, what kind of things you want to talk about, we did kind of come up with a list of things when we first started doing these, in case there's just a lull or you have someone who's not that talkative, and you need to be the driver of the conversation. You want to be sure you have a list of questions. There's nothing wrong with a swipe or two in silence too. I mean, you're out there in nature and it's just beautiful, and seeing the equipment and the crops, and I find all of that very mesmerizing personally when I'm watching the equipment go along and do its thing. But you're there to learn, obviously. So for when the conversation might lull, you probably want to be equipped with a list of questions, things that you do want to know about. And this is just an example of some that we came up with. And I think Amy's going to share these slides with you too. So you don't have to worry about writing all of these down. If they're interesting to you or you want to reuse some of these, that's great. Come up with your own. I think that's about all I have to say about the questions. How about you, Lois?
Yeah, like you said, sometimes a little bit of silence is good. And you can just watch the machinery, like you said,
Yeah,
you get mesmerized,
yeah,
especially
it
during
is.
harvest.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
mhm.
The final thing, we really only have, I don't know why this one's playing already. We only have this one more slide, but these are just some videos that we've taken while we're out with farmers. Is this one you took, Lois? Maybe, I'm not sure.
No, I think that was yours.
Is it?
I don't know.
I don't know
Yeah, I think
either.
that I don't recognize the tractor.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if maybe this was Jessica's, because I'm not sure I do either. But anyway, that's not, something you would get to see actually in the cab with the farmer. This one is definitely mine, chopping silage. There is a giant silage program at Fair Oaks Farms. Obviously, they have all of these cattle to feed. And I just love watching this. And there's so much going on. And, this farmer is watching as it fills the semi driver is watching to make sure he's staying up with the tractor. And this whole process, I've actually gotten to ride in both machines that you see here, the silage chopper and the semi. And then the semi takes it to a giant pile and drops it. And then these smaller tractors push it up into these giant hills. I mean, I thought we were going to fall down backwards off this hill, but we didn't. So there just was so much to learn. I had no idea what all was involved in this, and seeing all of the tons of acres of silage that are chopped in like a 3-week time period in September. It's just fascinating to me. This one, I don't, just chopping corn.
Yeah, chopping corn.
And let's see what this last one was. Oh, I think this was
That
your
was a
supervisor.
homemade, yeah, that was a homemade seeder for cover crops. It was a piece of steel that sat in the fence row for years and years. He didn't use it because it was tillage equipment, and then he revamped it so that it would just barely scratch the ground, but that's what he uses to plant his cover crop seed. And it was kind of interesting to know that a lot of these guys, you know, they build stuff on the fly. They don't necessarily go out and buy a brand new seeder. They use, like this guy, something that was in the fence row. And it was interesting to hear him say that every acre on every farm has cover crops.
Wow. That's great. Yeah, farmers are a really innovative bunch, I have found. And just like Lois said here with the equipment, they find a way to make things work. Stop that share for now. I'm really interested in what you guys think or what concerns you might have doing this. If anybody else has experiences they would want to share about their ride-alongs.
Well, Tammy says that she rode with a supervisor, but he wouldn't let her drive the combine. I'm sorry, Tammy. Maybe someday.
I have not yet asked to drive, so that might be a bucket list item for me.
So I'm wondering, and I think we've talked about this briefly before, but to kind of speak to the fact that if you're riding with a farmer and, you know, of course, we all come from the world of conservation, encouraging conservation. We want to see more conservation practices. But what about those farmers you ride with that really aren't quite on board with that yet? How do you kind of handle that so that it's not an uncomfortable situation or conversation?
Yeah, for me personally, I just focus on listening. I'm not there to judge what they're doing, how they do it, why they do it that way.
Yeah.
I'd definitely be willing to share with them some things about conservation, different trainings we might be holding, or how something might be of benefit to them. If they mention issues, for example, with erosion or something, you know, it might bring an opportunity to bring up some cover crop planting or some different things like that that they might consider, but never in a judgmental fashion or uh, that they're doing anything wrong. You know, that's definitely not what we're there for. We're not there to offend anybody or talk them into something they're not ready for.
Right. I rode with a farmer one time that was pulling a ripper, and it's like I bit my tongue for a while, but and I asked him why. You know, he had his reasons for doing this, and you're not going to change any minds in a 2 hour ride, but you can gather some information and why they think that's important, and maybe at a later time follow up. In fact, I think at a later time he stopped by my house to buy some honey, and I gave him some of my no-till magazines that I'd already read.
Nice.
So,
It's a great way to work that in.
yeah. But yeah, you don't want to get preachy in one of these rides. And like Sheila said, it's more listening than it is talking about what we do. And you always learn more by listening than you do by talking, right? So.
For sure.
Other questions? Feel free to type them in the chat or unmute yourself. Very informal today. We'd love to hear from you, or even experiences you've had.
And I've had ride-alongs that lasted a half hour, and I had a couple of ride-alongs that lasted all day.
Yeah, it's a
So,
good point. I've had ride-alongs that lasted so long, I had to find a tall corn for a restroom break. It's just the way it is in the farming world.
Hi, ladies. I have a quick question. So Gene Whitty, one of my producers here in Adams County, asked me to jump on this. He thought this was going to be about doing virtual ride-alongs and how you can do that. However, that is something that we are thinking about doing, posting to our YouTube channel and sharing on social media, just to kind of engage some of our community that doesn't understand the ag practices. So from your experience being in tractors, how hard is it going to be to get the farmer's audio while I'm taking video? It's pretty loud. I mean, I've been in a couple, but I've never tried to record anything.
I've taken videos during my ride-alongs, and I don't have any difficulty really hearing the talking that's happening over
Okay.
the equipment noise. Uh, I
yeah.
don't know if maybe, headsets probably would be helpful to keep out some of that background noise.
Okay. Yeah, it's something we're just thinking about maybe doing, especially for some of our students and our youth
Mhm.
education. But
Yeah, I think
we'll
that's a
see if it
great
works
idea
out.
to get anybody and everybody a little more familiar with farming. It's not something that everybody thinks about because they think it
Right.
doesn't affect them, but it doesn't matter who you are. Farming affects you. If you eat, like, you are affected, and knowing something about it is beneficial to everybody, I believe.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Love that
And if you're
idea.
using your phone, you have it right there. I mean, there's not a lot of room in the cab, right? You're sitting in the buddy seat and the farmer's sitting in the driver's seat. So unless it's a very loud tractor, you shouldn't really have a problem. You'll hear the engine, but it won't overpower your
Yeah.
audio, I don't think.
Okay, great.
Um,
Good to know.
I've never been on a ride along before. Is it generally just you and the farmer? Does anyone else come along? Or I know there's not very much room, but
Yes, when I've done these, it's always been just me and the farmer in the tractor, but I've definitely come across other people. For example, in the silage production, there's the semi drivers, and then we go to the pile, and then there's, a different crew of people pushing the silage. I also, during a ride along, had a farmer who needed to reload his seed. So a farmhand met him at the field, and so then, I was able to meet another person. But typically, I probably more often than not, only see one other person during my ride along day.
okay, cool.
Women farmers out there too. So if if those of us that are women, if you feel more comfortable with that, talk to your FSA people or district conservationist, and they can probably give you names of a local woman producer that you might be able to ride along with for your first time.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Women are better drivers anyway, right?
Now, Lois.
We're recording, Lois.
I'm sorry.
Speak to the time of year for ride-alongs. Times of year, I suppose.
Spring and fall.
Is there a better time?
Early
Yep.
planting season, you can catch some folks seeding cover crops even in August. And then, there's nothing wrong with a January, February shop visit. Find out what these farmers are doing what are they ordering? When are they ordering their seed, their fertilizer if they use it? How are they putting together their tax documents? There's so much more that goes into it besides just planting and harvest. And so it's a good way to learn about some of those things too. Not as much fun as riding in the tractor, but you know. And also there's value to ride with a variety of different producers. We talked about the ones who aren't into conservation, you know, ride with those folks, talk to them, see what they're doing, why they do it that way. But then find somebody who plants green, find somebody who just plants into last year's stubble. Like there's so many different things that you can see with different producers. Oh, and crimping. That's something I haven't gotten to do yet. I haven't ridden along with anybody who's been crimping their cover crops yet. So that's on my list.
I also encourage people to reach out to, say, forest farms. People have livestock. You're not riding around, you're wallowing in manure, perhaps, but I consider that also a ride along, except you're walking. And that's also very encouraging and very engaging, especially on the farm forest, or forest farm, I guess I should say correctly, venue, because I know that ride along sounds like getting on the Kubota, getting on the combine, getting on the tractor, but there are so many other ways that we can reach out to farmers. And they also have, in the case if they have interior fencing, you can ride along and see how they transfer animals from one fencing environment to another fencing environment and things like that. So this really is a relative type concept.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Tammy. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep. I mean, I went out in the spring for right along planting, but we ended up feeding the cattle and actually saw a newborn calf still wet that morning.
Aw,
So you see some neat things when you're out there.
yeah.
Spending time on the farm, it's a good place to be.
Great way to spend a work day.
Yes.
I have a question. This is Vicky from Steuben County.
Hi,
Mhm.
Vicki.
Hi, Indiana, Steuben County, Indiana. You're probably thinking, what in the world are you doing here? Or who are these two people? But we're from the Steuben County Lakes Council. That's an environmental organization here. You know, and keep track of our water quality because there's lots of lakes here and surrounded by farmers. This is very interesting, was passed along by our Steuben County Soil and Water District representative. She
Great.
suggested that we check in with you folks. My question is, how do you know which farmers will do this? Is there a list of, I might have missed that in some of the conversation, but how do you know, or do you just ask? And I also agree, I think in some of the areas that we're talking about, a walk along would suit our needs maybe up here for the horse farms and some of the other type of farms. And how do we maybe initiate a walk along?
You can probably get a lot of suggestions from your contact at that soil and water conservation district. They are probably familiar with farmers in your area, and maybe even know a little bit personality wise who might be willing to host someone. And it may be that they need to give your information to the farmer. You know, it depends whether farmers are comfortable having their information passed out to other people, that kind of thing. But the district conservationist with NRCS in your county would be a good resource for knowing farmers who might be willing to help. Your A&R educator from Purdue Extension could be a good resource as well. And the employees there at FSA, the Farm Services Agency, would also be a great place to find out some folks in your area that might be willing to host you.
Great. Yeah, that's good. Good resources. Thank you.
Sure.